Okay, welcome to the first layout update for my GMRC VTR HO scale layout build. For those of you that watched the first video, I talked about the plans for construction, the size of the layout, and so forth. If you haven't checked out that video yet, I highly recommend it. It goes into a little bit of detail on what I'm planning in terms of bench work, scenery, operations, and a little bit of everything for plans for the future. So what you're looking at here is a perspective from the doorway entering into the layout room. It shows most of the layout with the Chester module to the right of the screen, straight ahead being the North Walpole area. To the left of that, the Bellows Falls yard, and then where you see the lift gate towards the bottom of the screen, that is the main line track running between Bellows Falls and Chester. So let's take a closer look at what I've got going on here. Okay, so now that I showed you a sort of roundabout view of the entire layout and the basic shape of it, I'd like to go into a little bit more detail about the construction of each module. So all the modules, and there's 4 total, are constructed the same way except for one. It has a slight difference in the leg structure, and I'll show that in just a minute here. So, as mentioned in the first video, it's an L-girder construction, and if you don't know what that is, essentially you have longer boards on the bottom, 2 on each side that form an L shape. And then you have cross members that are perpendicular to those on top that are screwed into the shorter part of the L shape. And I can demonstrate that in a minute here. You have those cross members on top, and you can either line the top with plywood or foam or both. And in this case, I've done both just to have a little bit more support. So if we look at the leg structure here, 3 of the modules have this same leg structure here. And if you look to the right of the screen, you can see those carriage bolts bolting the legs to that L-girder framework. And each module has this set of carriage bolts on each side so that the legs can be removed. Now I've screwed the gussets there that you can see. I've screwed those in place. It wasn't going to work with carriage bolts, but can easily be removed so you can detach all the different components of the legs if it ever had to be removed. So here's a closer look at the underside of one of the modules. And you can see here what I was referencing before with the L-girder system and how the cross members, the perpendicular cross members, rests on the L-girder structure and then can be screwed from the bottom up. Now this is the first time that I've done this type of bench work, and for those of you who aren't familiar with it, I highly recommend it. It's not a very common method, or as common as opposed to an open grid sort of structure, but it worked for this particular application, and I wouldn't have done it any other way, I don't think. So here's an example of one of the module joints themselves, looking from the top down, obviously. So what I've gone ahead and done is created a sort of substructure underneath using the L-girder system and using what I call end caps to sort of bolt together the underside of the modules. Essentially what I did is I created a cap or an end piece on each side of the actual L-girder pieces themselves, and then I fed carriage bolts through those end pieces or those caps, and that's what you're seeing here. So the 2 caps or the 2 end pieces on the separate L-girder sections fit together, and they're screwed together with the carriage bolts and allow a nice tight fit. So as I mentioned previously, all of the modules except for one have the same style of legs on the bottom. Now I demonstrated the normal setup that I have for 3 of the modules previously, and this is what I have decided to do for the last one. So what this is here is this is just 4 vertical legs with some 1x4s around the edge, and I'm planning on creating a shelf, a storage shelf for my rolling stock, or maybe a cabinet with some drawers or something like that I might build to be able to store supplies in. Another component of the bench work I wanted to quickly discuss was threaded leveling feet on the Benchwork legs. This is something I utilized for the first time on my last layout, my Rocky Valley shelf switching layout. I utilized these threaded leveling feet for the basement floor since it was fairly uneven, and it made a tremendous difference. This is something I think that everybody should have, regardless of whether or not your floors are perfectly level or even slightly off. It makes a big difference in how your layout operates and how the benchwork sits together. Another thing I wanted to discuss about the layout construction is the design for the backdrop and the fascia. So as I mentioned in my introductory video to the layout, I wanted to attempt a lot of things I haven't attempted before. So the backdrop itself is something that I've attempted, but the fascia is not. So one thing I've decided on here, and I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I've gone ahead and done it anyways, is I've sealed the module joints, the module joints and the hardboard joints with plaster, including the screw holes. Now this is something I could easily reverse right now if I wanted to. I'm still contemplating doing that, but I wanted to get it nice and smooth, make everything nice and flush, because what I'm planning on doing for the backdrop in the future is a photo backdrop. So just like you would when you're painting a backdrop, you want that surface to be nice and smooth. So I went ahead and I filled in all the screw holes, module joints, and then the hardboard joints themselves. But what I want to talk about now is the fascia. So this is completely new to me. I've never done this before, and I had a few issues. And one of them is this corner here. You can see that those two fascia panels don't quite match up right. I had to re-drill the holes in them a second time to make sure that the screws could fit in there properly, but it turned out okay. So what I've gone ahead and done is I've used, I think these are 1 1/4 inch drywall screws. That's what I had used for the backdrop. I had plenty remaining, so I use them for the fascia. I've got those 1 1/4 inch screws with some finishing washers screwed into the cross members that go across the L girder substructure beneath. I had to come up with a way to join the two hardboard panels together for the fascia other than just a single cross member. There wasn't enough room for all 4 screws to fit on there. So I went ahead and I screwed in 1 inch by 2 inch blocks that I cut from some scrap 1x2s on each side of one of the cross members, and then screwed in the hardboard panels to those. So this section of the fascia here was definitely the most problematic. And it wasn't so much the angle of the underlying module joint that you see over there to the right of the screen, but it was actually this very tight curve here. So this is something I had not anticipated during the design phase, and it presented a bit of a challenge. So what I've gone ahead and done to get this to shape like this is I purchased ammonia. I got it at Walmart, just ammonia solution, and I mixed it with water. So I made a 5% ammonia solution, and I sprayed this board down, particularly the side with the sharp curve, I should say. I sprayed that down and screwed in the 2 screws that you can see sort of to the left of that curve. I screwed it in and sprayed it over the course of probably, 10 or 15 minutes. Let the ammonia solution soak in, and I slowly bent the fascia around that curve and then screwed it in as I went along with each set of drywall screws and finishing washers that you see there, until I got to the end where it meets the other module. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the module for North Walpole Yard. And as I mentioned in my introductory video, North Walpole Yard is where the passenger excursion trains would depart from. This is where the engine house is, this is where they store the cars, and all that good stuff. So this track to the right is the storage track for the passenger coaches. Now, in the plan that you saw in the first video, this track actually was slightly longer, and one of the issues I had was my choice of placement for the module joint. Now, this may or may not affect operations, I'm not sure yet. What I'm contemplating doing is making the spur track longer and crossing that module joint. I was trying to limit this because each time that the tracks cross a module joint and you have to set it up to be able to separate, that's a potential spot for a derailment. So if we pan back to North Walpole Yard here, you'll be able to see sort of the outline I have for the rest of North Walpole Yard. So the two tracks closest to us is the ethanol transfer facility, and then the next track above that is the main line, and then the tracks you see above that is the switch or switches leading into the engine house. Now this is another area that sort of became compromised due to my choice and placement of the module joint. Let me get a little closer here and I'll show you what I mean. Alright, so taking a closer look at the engine house tracks for the North Walpole module, you can see that the track furthest from us that's right against that backdrop is very, very tight against that, and it's also much shorter. So this is problematic for two reasons. One, the rolling stock would probably scrape alongside the backdrop, and then two, that particular siding, or spur track rather, is too short to accommodate anything other than maybe some 40-foot cars, which I wouldn't really be using on this layout. So there's really no purpose to have that track there. I wanted to have a third track that was sort of tucked behind the engine house, but I'm thinking that that's just not going to work. So I'm contemplating taking that switch, removing it, having just two tracks to service the engine facility, and then use that switch elsewhere, possibly near the diamond for the interchange for the B&E. So continuing on and working our way to the left, we're going to cross over the Connecticut River from North Walpole Yard into Bellows Falls Yard. And you can see here the runaround track and the spur track for Bellows Falls Station there, closest to us. Now, again, I'm having issues here with this particular location because of the two yard tracks alongside the backdrop. It's a little bit of a tight fit, but I don't think it's as bad as the North Walpole location. So I'm going to go ahead and keep those two tracks there for now, but I may or may not shift them a little lower if possible later on. So taking a closer look, you can see that indentation in the foam. It wasn't actually too tricky to create a slight grade out of that foam and onto the mainline section. So you can see towards the center of the screen, this is where the diamond is, and there's going to be a crossing here, and this represents the interchange with the B&E. Now, I may or may not use that switch from the North Walpole Yard over here somehow if I can configure it, or I may end up purchasing another one to be able to have a siding or the interchange track come off the curve and then go towards the backdrop to represent the interchange. Again, that's just an idea that's in the works, but I'm definitely leaning that way. So as we continue to the left, we're now looking at the second river scene, which is again the Connecticut River, and this is where the truss bridge will be located. So those two cutouts along the riverbed is for the bridge structure itself. So on the prototype, the truss bridge actually sits into the landscape a little bit with concrete supports below it. So I've tried to go ahead and replicate that, and I think it turned out okay. Again, I'll have to do a bit of a test run with this and see if I like that idea, and if not, I can come up with something else. But so far, it looks good and it should work out just fine. So before continuing on to Chester, I just wanted to show a little bit more of a close-up of the lift bridge that I've come up with. So I haven't done a lift bridge before, or lift gate, whatever you want to call it. So this is all new to me. But after looking at a few schematics, watching a few videos on YouTube, I think I've come up with something that will work for the layout. The only issue that I might have with this lift gate is due to this area of the module over here. So all that plaster over there, right along the lift gate, where it feeds into the module, all that plaster there was used to level the foam. Now I had an issue when constructing the layout where some of the pieces of foam weren't exactly the same height. And when joining up the two pieces that I had, because one piece was 8 feet long and then I had another foot to go, there was a little bit of a lip there and it would have caused problems. So I sanded down the foam to get the two pieces to meet, and then I had to create a gradual slope, very, very slight, using the plaster so that everything would be smooth. So taking a bit of a closer look, we're now where Erskine Rain Garden will be. If we keep panning to the left, we'll see where I have a planned curved turnout. And we're back to that module joint again that I was referencing earlier. And this part here is where the two sides of the journey meet. Chester, North Walpole. This is not prototypical in the real world, but this is where they join together in my world, allowing for the continuous operation. The last thing I wanted to talk about with regard to my GMRC build is the resources that I've used to get me to this point so far. So prior to even beginning to build the Benchwork and even putting together a design for the Benchwork, I invested in this series of books, the Model Railroader Essential Series books, and they have topics on benchwork, track, DCC wiring. I believe they even have some on scenery, but I'm not 100% sure on that. This is an older series, and I don't know if they actually update these now or if they have any newer editions. I found these on eBay for a few bucks each, which wasn't too bad, but the information in them is still the same. Some of the methods might have changed a little bit, but the overall principles and the overall concepts are still there. So when I began looking into L-girder benchwork, this book was a no-brainer. It has a great section on that, and it even gives an example plan of how to put it together. So I would highly recommend that when you're putting your design together, you want to make sure you understand the results that you want to achieve and go from there. So this series of books is a great start. In addition to that, YouTube videos, obviously, or it could even be resources like clubs or hobby shops, if you have any local hobby shops. I know those aren't as common as they once were, but just gather your resources, make sure you understand what you're looking for in your build, and then go from there. Having done that on this build, I can say that it's really great to do that. I'm really happy with the results, and even though I did make a few small mistakes, I think it's turned out great so far, and I'm looking forward to continuing. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the first layout update video. I know it wasn't the most exciting, but I did make quite a bit of progress in such a short period of time. I'm hoping to make another update video in the next 3 to 4 weeks. I'm aiming for about every month if I can to provide the viewers with updates. Depends on life and that sort of thing. But I wanted to go ahead and finish this video off with a little sneak peek of some of the rolling stock that we're going to see on the layout in the future. So on the left we have the Alco RS1 number 405. This is an Atlas model. This is a locomotive that has pulled the passenger consists for many decades, and it's quite a famous locomotive. On the right I have one of two HO scale Rivarossi passenger coaches. These are 60-foot coaches, unlettered, there's no decals or anything like that. It does come with handrails and details such as that, but I haven't installed them yet. I also have 3 other passenger cars that I purchased used on eBay a while back. I've stripped the paint off, and I'm in the process of acquiring details, and I'm going to be painting those to match the Rifferossi coaches. I like the color of that. So this is just a little sneak peek of some of what you're going to see in the future. Obviously, trains won't be running anytime soon, but I figured the viewers would enjoy a little sneak peek of this. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Please comment, like, and subscribe. Thank you.